Hi, good morning. My name's Carrie. I'm with Cooper Counseling Practice, and I just wanted to show a quick technique this morning that I thought might be helpful for you. I've done a couple of these little videos called 101s, just very casual discussions about a tool or a technique or a concept that I thought might be helpful. I don't know about you guys, but for me, session time seems to go by really quick by the time I kind of get caught up on how you're doing, what's going on in your world. And then by the time we're wrapping up, it seems like there's just not a whole lot of time in that middle time for us to really talk about skills and tools. So I've done a couple of these little videos just to give some background, some little extra information and support. So I wanted to do that today about a tool called tapping. So you may be familiar with this. It's become quite popular. It's being used anywhere from veterans associations to a lot of trauma work, but also just every day. I saw it on TV the other day. They made a reference to it. So it's become almost pop culture, which is great. So anyway, so tapping is kind of built on some of the very similar principles as EMDR and brain spotting and some of these other kind of tools and techniques that have come into existence that are kind of based on brain-body connection. And so if you've ever done work with me, that's something I believe very strongly in, that we can't look at mental health purely as just, I think people have this image of someone laying on a couch and just talking about all their problems since they were a child. That's just not really how we see mental health today. We know a little bit better. We know that our brains and bodies are all connected. And so we need to kind of address those on the same level, right? We can't just address one without the other. And so tapping, or EFT, so the clinical term is EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. It's been around for quite some time. And there is a lot of information online. You can Google it, you can go to YouTube. The great thing about this tool is that you do not need me. Once you kind of know the process and have a feel for it, you are welcome to use it on your own. So that's a little bit different than brain spotting or EFT or some of these other brain body movement techniques where you need a little bit of clinical support. This was created and designed for you to use on your own. Now, I would love to help you, and so please don't hesitate to reach out. Sometimes we need a little bit of guidance, especially in the beginning. So if that's something I can support you with, by all means, don't hesitate to reach out. But that's one reason I love it, is because this is a tool you have that once you learn it, you can have it in your pocket. You can use it anytime you need. You don't need any equipment. It's all just you and your own body and mind. So you don't need any special tools or equipment or even clinical support. This is definitely something you can do on your own. Now, like anything, if whatever you're experiencing is overwhelming, then by all means get some clinical support. That would be true with anything, whether just something popped in your head. If anything feels overwhelming, then by all means get some clinical support. But as a technique and a tool, you don't need any certification. This is something you can learn. Because of that, because it is something that was created for people to do for themselves, there is an abundance of information online. EFT Universe was one of the original kind of sources of information, but there's a million of them. I think that's who I got my initial training through. Well, I'll tell you about my initial training, but that's where I've got some other additional training through, is through EFT Universe, but there's lots of them. You can go to YouTube. There's lots of how-to videos. So my own journey with this was, I do disaster mental health as part of my volunteer work on the side. And disaster mental health is very different than traditional therapy, because we normally only have contact with the people we're working with for a very short amount of time. And it's usually very crisis oriented. So, a building just caught on fire, or a coworker just committed suicide. I did some volunteer work in Guatemala after they had a earthquake. And so these are people that I'm not going to have a long-standing therapeutic relationship with. I'm going to go in, I'm going to meet them, hopefully be a place of support for a very limited amount of time, and then I leave. And so they need to have those skills and tools to continue their own support on their own. And so that's how I was introduced to tapping, was in one of my very first crisis incident trainings, I was introduced to this tool and told exactly that. This is a great tool. Anyone can learn it. You don't have to be a licensed therapist. You know, I was working with clergymen and volunteers and nurses and, you know, people from all walks of life. And we were all getting the same training. So it made no difference that I was a licensed practitioner. And so that was my initial introduction to it. And, you know, it seemed a little awkward at first, but they had it do us to ourselves, which is normally what we do in clinical work, right? We're our own guinea pigs. And so I saw benefit and I have continued to use it. So it's something I personally use in my everyday life. And I think this is true probably to most clinicians, but the kind of tools and skills I advocate the most for are probably the tools and skills I use myself because I feel so confident in them because I've seen how they've been helpful to me. This is one of those tools. So tapping, or EFT, is based on a meridian points. So if you're familiar with Chinese medicine or acupressure or acupuncture, it's very similar concepts that there's certain points in our bodies that hold energy. And a little bit of CBT, because, you know, that's my theoretical background. So it's paired with also a mental message. So this goes back to that brain body connection. So what I love about tapping is it's not one or the other, it's both. So we're doing a physical act. We're going to be actually tapping on some meridian points for ourselves, but we're also giving ourselves a message. So the message is, even though blank, I completely and deeply accept myself. So what goes in that blank is whatever we identify as being what is causing us some duress. So even though I'm stressed about giving a presentation, I completely and deeply accept myself. Even though I'm stressed, even though, you know, I'm upset because I just had a horrible fight with my partner, I completely and deeply accept myself. Even though I'm feeling so blue, I don't want to get out of bed, I completely and deeply accept myself. And so it sounds easy, but you'll find over time that messaging actually becomes super important. So the first step is to do exactly that. Identify what's causing you some anxiety. So one of the things I have used this most consistently with over a pretty broad period of time has been my fear of flying. So if you don't know me real well, I love to fly. I love to travel. I have family that live abroad, so I don't have a choice. I have to, if I want to see family, I have to fly. And it's not a 1 hour flight, a 2 hour flight, it's a 13-hour flight. So before, when I was highly anxious about flying for an hour or so, you know, I could kind of endure it. I could take some medication or do something to just kind of get through it. But when you're on a 13-hour flight, that is just miserable to be that anxious for that long period of time. And so one of the things I've used is this technique. So what I would say is, even though I'm afraid of flying, I deeply and completely accept myself. That would be my frame of message. So we'll talk more about that because my message actually changed. So initially that would be my message. Even though I'm afraid of flying, I completely and deeply accept myself. So once I've identified that message, I rank it on a scale of 1 to 10. How stressful is that for me? Well, that would depend, right? Because if I'm at the airport and I see the flags waving, if you know anyone who's anxious about flying, we're really good radar detectors for anything that may cause turbulence. And so if I'm in the waiting room for my flight and I see flags are just flopping around, or I hear on the, on the speaker that flights are delayed due to severe weather, you know, any of those things, well, I may scale it on an 8 or a 9 because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm already, before I've even boarded the plane, getting highly anxious. So I would scale it. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm at a 9. They just announced there's, you know, some severe weather in the area. So I've identified my stressor. I've identified on a scale of 1 to 10 what that would look like. And so now I start the tapping process. So we start with what we call the karate chop. So if you go to, you know, hit something on the table, you will know exactly what that is. So it's kind of that kind of fat part of our hand. So that's the karate chop. So that would be the first place we start tapping. And tapping, do what feels good for you. You don't want it to be so hard that, you know, you're causing yourself pain, and you don't want it to be so light that you're not actually activating anything. So you want it to just be enough that you're feeling it. So I would just take a couple of deep breaths and just say, even though, and then whatever you're stressed about. So in my case, even though I'm afraid of flying, completely and deeply accept myself. Now I would do this a couple of times. I'm not going to make you sit through and watch me do it 3 or 4 times, but a couple of times. Even though I'm afraid of flying, I completely and deeply accept myself. Okay. And then the next is the top of the head or the crown. So I tried to pull my hair back so you could see where I'm tapping, but even though I'm scared of flying, I completely and deeply accept myself. Again, you're going to do it a couple of times, but I'm not going to make you sit through and watch me do that. The next pressure point is between your nose, the top of your nose and your eyebrow. Even though I'm really scared of flying, I completely and deeply accept myself. The next one, and again, you'll feel the ridge on both of these points. You'll feel the ridge. So at the end of your eyebrow, even though I'm scared of flying, I completely and deeply accept myself. By the way, tapping feels really good. So, don't hesitate to use this anytime you need a little bit of stress relief. It's funny when I give these demonstrations, I feel more relaxed, even though this is somewhat stressful. And I hate hearing myself on tape. Anytime I demonstrate this, I feel more relaxed at the end. Just going through the motions. Again, you'll feel the ridge bone at the bottom of your eye. Even though I'm afraid to fly, I completely and deeply accept myself. And then under the nose, there's a little ridge. Even though I'm afraid to fly, I completely and deeply accept myself. Again, you want to do this message a couple of times. I'm going through it quickly and I'm not repeating myself just to spare you from having to sit through that with me. But even though I'm scared to fly, I completely and deeply accept myself. So right under your lip. Okay, this one's a little bit trickier. So if you feel your collarbones and then go right underneath them, you'll feel a little soft spot. Even though I'm scared to fly, I completely and deeply accept myself. Again, several times. And then the next one is under your arm. For us women, it's pretty easy. It's right where kind of your bra strap is under your arm. Even though I'm scared to fly, I completely and deeply accept myself. Again, you would normally do this a couple of times and then back at the karate chop. And kind of reassess. Okay, so let's say I've done that and maybe I've come down from a 9 to maybe an 8. That's still pretty darn high, right? So I would do that whole series again until we're down to like a 5 or less. Like we don't have to be in utopia, which would be a 0. Most of us have some level of stress, right? But a 5 or less would be my goal for most of us. So you would just keep doing that process and reassessing until you get it down. Now, I said you may tweak your message. So this is what happened with that exact message for me. What I realized through the tapping process was what I was really scared of was not flying, but was of dying. I was really scared of the plane crashing. That was what I was really scared of, right? And so when I started tapping, that came to my mind. Oh, what I'm really anxious about is not flying, but what I really have a fear of is crashing and dying. And so that became the message. Even though I'm scared of crashing, I completely and deeply accept myself. This is super important because your brain can't be tricked. It knows what it's really nervous about. And so while I might have gotten some relief by tapping on just being a little bit nervous about flying, what I really got benefit from was identifying what was underlying that. What was underlying that was a fear of crashing. Same thing, I had a presentation one time, and I'm not normally afraid of talking in front of people. It's just one of those things that I'm just wired, terrified of a plane, but put me in front of 5,000 people, I can talk to anyone. Doesn't really bother me. I was really nervous this one time, and I couldn't identify quite why. It was a conference, so that's and it was colleagues, which make it, I think, a little bit more stressful than people you don't know. But again, through the tapping process, what really came up is I was scared of making a fool of myself. So it went from, even though I'm scared of giving this presentation, I completely and deeply accept myself, to, even though I'm afraid of making a fool of myself. I completely and deeply accept myself. Much more powerful message. So again, tweak the messaging if you need to and go through the process. This has been a tool that's been extremely helpful for me. And again, once you learn the process, it feels awkward at first, and you're probably having to look at a cheat sheet, which by the way, I have. And so if you need support from me, please don't hesitate to reach out. Even if you're not someone I normally work with, just email me, shoot me an email. That's the quickest way to get me. And I will send you some resources. But again, there's a million online. There's EFT Universe, there's tapping, there's YouTube. There's a number of places you can get the information. So don't stress about that. But it feels a little awkward at first because you're having to read the script and be like, oh, I missed this point. I needed to go here, So give yourself some grace for it to feel the benefit, because initially it's going to feel a little awkward. But again, Chinese medicine has been around forever. CBT has been around forever. It's kind of a combination of them both. It's been a really helpful tool for me. And I hope it will be for you. They even have sample scripts online. So if you're a little nervous about, like I'm going on a first date with someone, I'm not really sure what my script should be. There's even sample scripts online, so it'll even tell you. And again, I can help you with that. So if you need some help with it, feel free to reach out. I can walk you through it a couple of times, help you identify your messaging, and then you can do it on your own. Once you become accustomed to it and you have it memorized, you can do it without even thinking. You will also find there's probably certain points that feel best to you. So it is important, at least initially, to do the whole process. But over time, like sometimes I can feel like if I'm about to walk into something where I feel a little stressed, for me, this is a good one. And I might just real quickly be like, okay, even though I'm feeling a little stressed, I completely and deeply accept myself. And then I can walk in. I didn't have to do the whole process. I just was feeling a little stressed, and this was a point that felt good for me. For a lot of people, the crown is a sense point that feels good to do some stress relief with that. So again, if you've had acupuncture, acupressure, it's the same concept. We store places, stress in different areas. I will also say, if you ever find some tenderness in this point or under the arm, there are lymph nodes under there. So if you're tapping and you're like, ooh, I feel a little tender there. I've had that happen. I felt perfectly fine and then realized, oh, I must be fighting a little something. It's a little tender because lymph nodes were a little bit sensitive. That just means you're fighting a little cold or something. And so you're not going to do anything by tapping on it, but it just means you might need to drink some orange juice because you might be fighting a little bit of a cold. Again, all this information's online, but it's been incredibly helpful for me. I hope it's helpful for you. This is a great thing to do between sessions if you're feeling a little anxious or if you identify something. There is a trauma protocol, but that does require you to have a little bit of support. So if you've had some trauma, what I would do is highly recommend practicing this with just everyday stressors. And then when you meet with a clinician who's EFT trained, you'll be in a better place to address trauma. So we can do some trauma work with EFT, but again, that would require a little bit of support for you. And the process is just a little bit different, but it's incredibly helpful if you've already memorized it and got the routine down, so that when we do trauma work, you're not having to also remember where do I tap next and what is the message I use. You already know how to do that part of it. So if this would be helpful for you in trauma work, then yeah, feel free to reach out to me or to any EFT trained person. This is also great for kids. There's even YouTube videos specifically made for kids to teach them how to do this. And for some of my kids that were older or maybe a little self-conscious, they could always go to the restroom and do it behind closed doors. But I would also teach them to do the karate chop and the replacement message under their desk. So they can put their hand under the desk and do that, and no one even knows what they're doing. And so it's a great tool for kids and for teenagers. So hope it's helpful for you. Again, my name is Carrie. I am a licensed professional counselor and supervisor and LCDC counselor. So if I can be of any support, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email is Carrie, Keri, at coopercounselingpractice.com. You can also go to my website, www.coopercounseling.com, and it has links to YouTube videos, which will include this, and some other 101 videos, and some information and some resources. So have an amazing day. And I would just encourage you that whatever stressor you're going through, get some support and get what you need to have your best day ever.